Okay, we are ready to start. It is 3:05 in the Paris, Madrid Central Time, 2 o'clock in Lisbon. It's early in the morning in the Latin America. So this webinar will be translated into 3 languages, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. So hopefully we will reach a wide audience. My name is Francisco Cabrera. I am the Operations and Security Chief in UIC. Vanessa? Hello, good afternoon. My colleague, Vanessa? Yes, please introduce yourself. Vanessa Perez. I work at the UIC. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I'm very pleased to hold this webinar together with Paco and all of you. Yes, as you can hear, everybody calls me Paco, so please feel free to call me Paco as well. We are responsible, Vanessa and myself, for the organization of this webinar and for inviting you to participate. We have a high-level speakers today from major companies, infrastructures of Portugal. We are going to start with the blackout experience in Portugal, and then we will hear 2 regional operators from Spain. Then we will have a short break, otherwise it would be a long session. We will have 15 minutes just to stretch your legs and have some coffee. And then we will continue with Spain, the main operator, ADIF, REMPE, and then also ADIF. And then we will have participation from the security department. We will hear about users, operations, civil protection, security in general. We will hear a presentation from the security department of UIC. And last but not least, we will hold a question and answer period. Vanessa? Thank you. Have you heard? We have a number of speakers who will address the audience in Spanish, Portuguese, or English. Therefore, we ask you please to check in your Zoom screen and select the channel that you prefer, Portuguese, Spanish, or English. Down below on the screen, you will see the different channels. As to the Q&A session, we will hold it at the end of the presentations. So we ask you, please, because I'm sure you will have questions, please write them down on the chat. And last but not least, a few reminders, some rules that you, I am sure, already know. As I said, please, questions on the chat. Okay, we will gather all the questions for the end. Also, keep your microphones muted at all times, unless you are making a presentation, of course. Please, respectful communication is required. Please listen to all interventions in a respectful manner. This is to show solidarity, because we're going to hear what our colleagues have gone through during the power outage in April. They had to face a complete power outage in their country and respect the time and the agenda. We're starting a little bit late. We're Latins, no matter what. And if you have any technical issues, please let us know. We will be monitoring all the session and recording the session as well. So that's all. Next. Well, we are ready to start with our agenda for for today. We have Alberto Garcia Alvarez. He's an engineer and an economic science PhD. He has wide experience. He joined RENPE in 1981. Since then, he has had an extensive career in the railway industry and is the author of numerous books, articles, and research papers. So you have the floor. Thank you, Paco, Vanessa. Thanks for this opportunity to join you today. And thanks to all the participants for joining us. As Paco said, we're going to listen to IP in two parts. We will have first Miguel Cruz. He is in charge of security since 2024. He worked in operational roles in the Portuguese Civil Protection Agency for 17 years. And also Artur Cerejo, who is the director of the Security Department and Protection of Comboios de Portugal. So please go ahead. I made a mistake. Um, Luis Silva, Ruiz Silva and Miguel Cruz. They are the representatives. And Ruiz Silva is the director of the Safety Department of IP's Safety Division. He has been the director for 15 years. So excuse me,
Good
it was my
morning, good
mistake.
afternoon, everyone. We are very happy to share with you the experience from this blackout, which unfortunately in Portugal, although it had a huge potential for harm, did not achieve its full harm potential. And you will understand if shortly why it did not have the impact it could have had. To give you an overview of what we have in Portugal, Infraestruturas de Portugal, it's a railway network that covers a significant portion of the country, most of the national territory, and the largest part is the electric traction network. Because it's electric traction, in a blackout, it could have had a huge impact, actually. Beyond IP, in managing our infrastructure, there are three other companies that belong to the IP group: IP Engineering for consulting, IP Patrimônio for the stations, and IP Telecom that manages telecommunications and gives support to the railway communication. A bit about the impact of the blackout on April 28th. As we had a strike in the main Portuguese operator, which is CP, Comboios de Portugal, it was a strike without minimum services. That is with 100% stop, which reduced the impact of this event in the passenger service, which reduced the potential associated to the event. The areas that had trains working, which was this 54 kilometers in the Lisbon region, where the operator maintained normal operation. And therefore, there was an impact. If we look at the national structure, it is just 2% of the total network, which is relatively little. The event started at 11:33 with total power failure. The systems that we had for support power to these failures started. There was no disruption except in the area where there was not backup external power to the national provider. Therefore, our uh, backup worked until 2:03 p.m. At that point, with some failures of fuel in the generators, this is one thing we want to explain, but the autonomy of the generators became a concern. They run for some time, but we realized it was not enough. And these generators support our data centers. So our data centers associated for the railway aspects as well as telecommunications, and they support a series of national telecommunication networks and some communication operators in the country, and our emergency communication network. And they also use these data centers. For some time, there was a total failure in this operation. However, we managed to refuel the generators at 7:10 p.m. and the data centers resumed functioning, starting then to recover to normal conditions. 2 hours later, power was restored, and then we started to get into normal operation. And at midnight, 18 minutes, we had this first passenger train circulating again in our network. The impact for passengers was relatively reduced due to the fact that I mentioned initially with the strike. Only 5 trains were suppressed, but luckily these 5 trains, they stopped in stations. So we didn't have any passenger trains stopped in open lines. So this also helped with evacuating the passengers because they are urban trains. So there was a way for passengers to reach their destinations using another mode. As for freight, one train stopped, one stopped outside station limits in open lines, and 4 reached their destinations because they were diesel powered. So we continued to have signaling. We continue to have some trains that were diesel powered. For traffic control, the traffic control applications went on operating, and what was mainly interrupted were the corporate systems. Before this blackout, we had did a TTX, a simulation, and the scenario was also of a power outage, although it was not a national outage or for the whole peninsula, but it was a more localized power outage. But that also allowed us to identify some weaknesses. Some of the weaknesses that we it also identified in the actual event, but we did not have time to prepare for the actual event because it happened really close in time. For this simulation lasted for 2 hours 45 minutes. And what you will notice is that it's after that time that problems come up, and we saw this in the actual blackout. So this was a simulation that was mostly focused on telecommunication for the data center and the applications. There was not much intervention in the traction or signaling areas. So it was mostly focused on the applications. So what we noticed for about the group's reaction. We developed a checklist that allowed us to document the whole event. It also allowed us to have a discussion in our business continuity committee meeting, which was a meeting that we have regularly, and that at that point received contribution from these events. And it was decided that in the second semester, we would implement an action plan and that we'd have an annual program for following the business continuity, where it would be followed mainly, we would follow mainly two areas that were considered critical: the energy portion and the communication, because it was one of the failures that was felt more greatly during the blackout. So what went well in this event? Naturally, there are things that work well. And what we realized is that the teams reacted, we remained calm, tried to maintain productivity in the essential areas. Naturally, there were no conditions for everybody to work normally, but the essential services were maintained. Everybody worked well under pressure, and we managed to ensure that we had the management and a central area that would allow continuity of the business in Pragal for all the services that did not depend on Oriente's data center. As I showed before, the Orient data center was shut off at 2 p.m. The generators worked, the UPSs, the generators worked in several buildings, especially in the operational control centers, so they could maintain their operations. If they had power for train traction, they could keep operating because they were maintained operational through the whole time. So we identified some risk and what we've learned from this blackout. Such a prolonged power failure for such an event, we have no capability to support with UPSs or generators for such a long time as this one. We were prepared for approximately 4 hours, and after that time, we start having problem. Uh, Also, in some areas, were effectively shut off. It is a lesson learned. Autonomy has to be a fact to be followed, is one of the most relevant aspects that we have seen, and redundancy in communications as well. The truth is, the country at some point, it was not just IP, the whole country at some point lost communication capabilities. The mobile networks collapsed. There were occasional connections, but with big difficulty. So we ended up managing to communicate as we had a connection with the Civil Protection Command. We managed to articulate with our partners that were dedicated to the emergency, and we managed also to refuel the generators that were possible due to this connection. As we did not have the capability to maintain these systems working for longer, and at a certain time we would have to shut off, they were going to shut off, there are some risks associated to that are complex. And it's connected to the fact that some equipment are not, some of the equipment is not new. And of course, they recover more slowly than the more modern ones. And here we run some risk that the systems, that if the system collapsed, we run the risk of them not reacting as expected. Good afternoon. I'm going to address the two working groups and the two task forces we're working with at this moment, the area of energy and emergency communications. As you've seen, the existence of alternatives in terms of energy supported by several area ended up being an advantage, naturally not with such a prolonged capacity for that situation, and therefore it ended up being one of the most critical functions, especially for us to take control of the situation, and that it was maintained during the whole blackout. Another aspect that we has mentioned is the existing connection with the protection systems through this liaison officer that managed to meet in order to follow up the crisis situation, and allowed somehow to, together with the civil protection system, to direct some of the actions for refueling of some of the identified needs. From the point of view of vulnerabilities, this alternative system from the energy point of view cannot protect us, safeguard us, safeguard the whole system and the whole capabilities of all buildings. Therefore, joining the necessary levels of autonomy for that, and the identification of which actions and essential functions have to be maintained in the different domains, not only railways but also highways, are important aspects that are being addressed within this task force that is currently developing their work. And the emergency communication level, and what clearly was developed was the cascade effect, which was the absence of energy in the level of the disruption of conventional communication systems. We all moved to GSM-based systems, and we abandoned, due to the technology evolution, some of the traditional modes as landlines, which effectively are aspects that we need to take into account and we have to reanalyze when maintaining the essential functions and the teams that can have on the ground. This situation would be particularly demanding if we had had the need to coordinate and support the process together with the railway companies, and the evacuation of passengers that would remain in the infrastructure. Therefore, it's an important aspect, but all issues and occasional intervention needs in terms of maintenance and maintenance of the systems. And in this perspective, our redundancy data centers are important, that they have to remain functional. As strengths, we have the possibility to have here, due to the fact that we have an established protocol with the civil protection system. We have access to the national emergency from the civil protection. So this could be one of the possibilities in the case that we're going to adopt some of this and equip some of these teams with radios from this same network, which allows in connection within the company, but also with external area.
Another aspect is related to what the teams, and as we already saw, a team group organizing functions was a good factor. However, it is important that people think and prepare to notice that disruptions of such a nature may occur, and therefore the protocols has to be adapted and prepared to different functions that will be degraded with a due capacity of action. Another important aspect that we see, we draw from that, because in this instance we were not able to maintain all the critical activities, is the directive board, or the board, the directive 2557 from 22 for the critical activities of the business related to crises of such nature in the technological area, in safety and rail traffic, and this needs to analyze events of this nature, centralize them and prioritize them, so then we can apply the perspectives of having a capacity to deal with a similar situation, maintaining functioning, and also have a capacity and having tools to deal with disruptive events of such nature. This kind of or other related to other areas. And in this perspective, it is important to be aware that we have to strengthen our capacity of resilience and business continuity in terms of operational activities in key functions from the standpoint of function in the first moment of the crisis, and maintenance of essential services for the population in the whole railway network. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel, for your presentation and for sticking to the time allowed. Thank you so much, and for your courage. Alberto, next. Yes, next we have Comboios of Portugal. They are going to explain their experience and the lessons learned from that event. Arthur, would you share your screen, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? Can you see my presentation?
May I remind you that you can switch to the Spanish or channel English to listen to this presentation, which will be delivered in Portuguese. Would you like me to do it? I think he's out. He will be back.
Vanessa, is it
Yes, would you
possible
please
for you
show
to
my presentation,
pass the
Vanessa?
slides in the presentation?
Yes, of course. Okay, so Paco will be in charge. Anytime you want.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Artur Cerejo. As you can see, I'm one of the directors of safety and security of CP, Companhias de Portugal. And this is the agenda for an overview of April 28, retrospective, and the impact in essential services in Portugal, and the consequences for railway transport at CP, Companhias de Portugal, and the lessons learned from this incident and final conclusions. And I would like to tell you in the next slide, Paco, please. At the April 28, we passed from a situation from normality to a total blackout, a situation to which we're not prepared. As you can see in the images, we went from a clear situation to total darkness. With all this, this is what happened. In the very same day, 1 hour after the incident, we were united, all the officials and all the officers of critical services and critical entities. We were gathered with Civil Aviation Authority, and later also the connection officers in meetings to manage the incident in the facilities by civil response. And this is how we started to manage the blackout incident at April 28. Continuing, what was the impact that this situation had in essential services in Portugal? And I will transmit the sensibility we had as a safety officer and the importance of being involved in companies such as ours, such as Comboios de Portugal, the railway administration, and the decisions taken throughout the day regarding the situation. And it's interesting to notice that at some stage, priorities are not perfectly what are the same priorities to all essential services operators, as the case of CP. And it was in this room of the National Authority of Civil Transportation that we decided all the activities to react regarding the situations that happened. This survey was carried out and dimensioned according to the needs we noticed in the situation room, and we started to notice what would be the disruption points of the different services and the emergency services for civil protection. And from this room, we managed all the needs that we noticed throughout the day. So, namely, how can we for instance, get the diesel to generators of essential services, how law enforcement could manage traffic in roads. So I'm sorry, Artur. You can carry on, Artur. I was saying, as you can see in this slide, we needed to guarantee that law enforcement could manage traffic, so we can have the diesel trucks getting to the essential services stations and emergency service station, what not always was easy. So the different diesel trucks will get to the different emergency services and essential services in a timely manner to manage them with the capacity of the generators. And it was not easy at the first instance, which leads to the need for the safety officers to be in this situation rooms in a national term, because we notice that when we have pressure to get diesel in the generators, so a hospital can have a capacity to to have the energy capacity they need, or a road or a railway are not as critical as a hospital. In these situations, we have to consider what the priorities in the situation room, and the priority was saving lives, which was successful because we practically didn't lose any life due to the blackouts. Next slide, please. As you can see here, not only was this important to save lives, but also to maintain communication. And why did communications become a key factor in this situation? In the bottom picture, you can see the traffic, internet drops and internet drops in the period of blackout. So we couldn't communicate through internet, but telecommunication companies maintain capacity of communication with failures, of course, but with a limited capacity of supporting essential communication. At the end of the day, was more complicated because the different antennas and UPSs start to lose energy, and we had the possibility of communicating with some failures, and WhatsApp became the most resilient tool for communication that we have. Notwithstanding, at the end of the day, also the communication network of safety and law enforcement, as well as emergency services, started to have problems because the system was not dimensioned to cover such a long blackout. So the supporting systems as generators and UPSs started to disconnect some antennas and leading to more complications in communication. And then we had to use systems as Starlink, which was useful, as you will see in the next slide, the need for alternative systems. But essentially, we saw it was possible to maintain a communicate. Regarding CP, railway transport, or in Comboios, Portugal. I think it was the first time I was happy to have a strike because we had a workers' union strike, and there was not minimum services maintained, which led to a lack of trains circulating. CP at April 28 had no trains circulating due to the strike. So due to the strike, we didn't have any commercial services circulating, and therefore we didn't have the pressure. And due to that, we didn't have major problems. And we were able to do a shutdown in one of our data centers, a program shutdown. And therefore, we didn't have any type of disruptions for CP in terms of operations or commercial. Next slide, please. So, regarding the lessons learned, I should say that CP, with other organizations, we have a set of protocols, safety and security measures and general services that in case of near misses incidents or accidents, we can speed up the procedures so the circulation of the trains is recovered as soon as possible and without having trains stuck in the rails. With the blackout and the energy outage in the whole country, this type of protocol would be used if we had safety issues, and it would be very complicated. So in stressful situations or disruption in face of a safety accident in the whole country, as it was the case of the blackout, it would be very complicated to manage a set of procedures that we have implemented in normal situations. Next, please. Next slide, please. So regarding the incident, the emergency protocols it's very complicated to maintain emergency protocols and maintain a capacity of response in these emergency protocols. In situations that covering in the whole country, such as and in at the same time, all the priorities, all the scenarios, all the safety and contingency plans are not capable to cover such situation. So there's always a deficit in face of what was predicted in a contingency plan and the real situation. So here, reality went beyond the forecast scenarios that usually we simulate for response in contingency plans. This was one of the cases where we saw that this was not a scenario that we planned for and was not forecast for anyone, and it happened. Next slide, please. What we can see in this situation is that communications are important. This image, this diagram is self-explanatory. So companies such as ours must have alternative communication channels. This is extremely important. they should be implemented and working, and with energy capacity for a long period. Next slide, please. Regarding infrastructure resilience and energy autonomy, what all of us here are doing simulations, yes, but the question is, what is the dimension of these schemes, of these scenarios? What is the time to which we will dimension these schemes? What is the capacity for the generators? How much will this cost to companies? What is the diesel waste that we will have, considering the needs in case of a blackout such as this one? We need here to ponder and have common sense in the response we will give to such a situation. And after this blackout, I heard different organizations saying that we will have to implement generators with a huge storage capacity. But how much will this cost to the companies? How we will lead, how we will deal with the situations? Last slide, please. So concluding, we notice that we need alternative telecommunication systems, but there are situations, we are talking about alternatives. The organizations had radio and satellite communication that they used. So far, we have to manage the situation with some waiting. It is, in fact, important to have simulation drills or measure our capacity of response, the capacity of the generators, the capacity of diesel storage tanks. We have to have this type of research and know who has to talk to whom in such a situation, because the fact of the national civil emergency officers being in contact to each other made easier the coordination of response to the emergency we had. So for me, these are essentially the main conclusions to draw from the situation. Thank you very much for your attention. And with that, I conclude. Well, at the end, we can have questions, and I will be at your disposal.
Thank you, Arthur. Next, we are going to Spain. There, the consequences were more local of this power outage. Well, we have members of the UIC present here representing Catalonia. They're going to speak about their experience. And first, we have John Anthony Perez de la Zarraga and Hernan Jimenez. Jimenez is responsible for operational safety and rolling stock at Euskotren. Euskotren is a regional railway operator in the Basque Country in northern Spain. And they're going to explain to us their plan in connection with their system. Go ahead, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I will be sharing my presentation. Can you see my presentation? I am Hernan Jimenez, responsible for operational safety and rolling stock at Euskotren. Ecostren is a transport operator in the Basque country in northern Spain. We operate trams, railways, buses, and funicular services. These services were impacted on April the 28th because of the power outage. Fortunately, we didn't have any serious consequence. Anyway, I'm going to speak about the railway system impact. It started at around 11 in the morning. We were close to France, therefore we were able to resume the energy service right away. So it started at around 11:30, but about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we already had reestablished the service. Little by little, we recover the service close to Bilbao and other urban areas. And until 9:30, we had not recovered all the service. So it took us until 9:30 to recover everything. Now, what are the problems that we found? Well, the deficiencies or issues detected. Communication was a big issue. Here we find three major items. Rolling stock, we realized that Tetra systems, which we use for communication between trains and control centers, are only available in the cabin or cab. So if the driver was to assist the passengers, he left the cabin, he would lose communication. Another aspect is that all communication systems were dependent on the main battery. They have their supply from the batteries. So if the trains are turned off to save energy so that they would be able to start back when the supply is resumed, then we lost communication. And mobiles and networks were saturated and they had no coverage. On the other hand, we had communications with other working personnel or staff. And these people wanted to help, but they were not able to communicate with the control center because all the lines were saturated. A major issue is that we have a single control center for emergencies and also for the network. This is not a big network, but in a situation like this, communications are key. If we have to cover 150 kilometers, then the network is not sufficient. Also, another aspect was communication with users at the stations. Most passenger information systems were not connected to the batteries, or they only had short duration batteries. And in these stations, we had no personnel to address the situation. This is a photograph showing an example of our network. We go through tunnels and viaducts. The Basque region is a very mountain type region. We have many mountains, very irregular landscape, and sometimes we're stopped in very complex areas. So it was difficult to evacuate all passengers easily. We had difficulties in transferring personnel to the remote locations to help passengers. It was difficult to move our staff to replace other drivers of trains that were stuck on the rails. Another aspect, after evacuating the trains, the decision was made to leave them on the tracks and to remove the drivers. So the train would be stopped on tracks, exposed sometimes to graffiti and vandalism. So there was a concern that we had. The security, so to speak, of our equipment. We also found deficiencies at the procedural level. We had contingency plans, which were local plans. We had not anticipated incidents that will have an impact on all the network, on all services. So the company-wide resources were focused on one area. We did not have the capability to distribute our resources to the whole region. And the contingency plans had not been designed with the resources necessary to cover the whole area. Well, after reflecting upon the issues that we had and what we had to improve, we developed actions and the way to implement them. We have technical actions, including little actions that could improve our response in the short terms, things that we could implement right away to improve response, and then also actions to be implemented in the mid and long terms for optimal response in the future. A problem is that Tetra terminals, as I said, worked on batteries with a short duration. So one action is to provide terminals with portable batteries or equipment. That will be done in the short term. Also, trains should have an independent battery, independent from the main battery. In this way, auxiliary services would be sustainable in case of an emergency. Services such as air conditioning. These services would be then operational even if the batteries of the train run out. Also, we are trying to implement a long-term solution, I know, and that is that the new trains, the trains in the future should be equipped with batteries that would allow them to cover small distances at a low speed. This is a way of autonomy so that they will be able to leave the dangerous areas. They will be able to move short distances. And also, we will see the possibility of having them reaching the nearest station with full autonomy. Our trains do not cover long distances between one station and the other. I would say that the issue is the topography in the region. The tracks are sometimes very narrow, and that's why trains are small and they don't have a large capacity to carry equipment. But we're thinking about changing this in the long term. As to stations, we will add batteries to all the stations for emergencies so that we will have capacity to operate the passenger information systems. Also, solar panels will be implemented to increase autonomy, particularly in remote stations. So little actions will be added as well, such as supplying loud public address speakers to stations. In this way, if the loudspeaker address system fails, then perhaps with megaphones, the staff would be able to inform passengers. These are things that we can easily implement. You see, we have actions that could be implemented in the short terms. Other will be for the long term. and we think of the final outcome. That is a system that will help us reducing incidents at a low cost. Last but not least, we are still continuing our analysis and reflection process. We are analyzing procedures. With a single control center, operations are not enough. There where you see the red star is where we have the control center. With a single control center, you cannot manage a situation like this fully at satisfaction. So we are going to cover 3 or 4 more regions or areas with their own control system for emergencies, and everything will be coordinated from the current control system. In this way, we will have better communications. We will have more channels of communications. So people will not have to communicate with the main control center, but with the secondary control centers instead. This will give us higher communication capacity. We will also implement local plans which are easier to manage. Local control centers will be operating as the meeting point in case of an incident. A problem we had is that people wanted to come and help. They wanted to join the service to help users. These people were, for instance, in the eastern region, and they were not able to reach the central control center to ask what they would do because communications had collapsed. So if we had local control centers, they will be the meeting point so people could go there and offer to help if needed. And if in a region the required actions have been completed, then that zone can support other zones with the resources that they have. So for every single zone, there will be an action plan. At the end of the day, the plan is the same, but I would say that it would be tailored to each zone. We had a big problem, so let's divide the problem into small pieces and tackle the problem that way. It will be easier. And the action plan includes providing information to users, providing support to drivers and replacing drivers if needed, the evacuation of trains, and the protection of assets. We will perhaps need additional support for evacuation from other staff. That's why we need a meeting point. We have 2 additional plans within the main contingency plan. One is to mobilize off-duty workers, and the other one is to mobilize transport resources. Sometimes we cover an area of 250 kilometers. We realized that we had no transport resources to take the staff to the trains that had been stuck on the tracks. So we need transport to mobilize personnel and also transport to evacuate people with disabilities or with difficulties. So we are designing a plan in order to use, for instance, company cars, even construction vehicles, private cars, in a situation like that. The construction vehicles could be very handy to evacuate people or take staff to the required sites in case of an emergency. And as I said, also private cars. The employees offered their private cars to provide support, and also alternative means, because the little things add. For instance, in the tram service, we didn't have any evacuation issues. It was easy. But on the other hand, we were not able in collapse areas to take the replacing drivers to where the trains were. So an easy thing, having some, for instance, bicycles, would be key in an emergency to go to the required site to reach the trains, or for the drivers to bike to the trains, and also to mobilize the employees. If we lose communication channels, how do we communicate people? And the people we have in the reserve for emergencies, well, they could ride on their bikes. It's an easy and simple solution. I recall we had problems with people who were not able to go to their work sites during their shift hours because they found no means of transportation. They couldn't get to their offices or to their work sites, and they were not able to communicate either. So we didn't know if they were coming or not. So we have to also create awareness among this staff. As we had people who were volunteers and wanted to help, we also had people who did not show up. So mobility is an issue. It's a basic need that has to be met during an emergency. And we have to provide the means for people to get to where they need to. Excuse me, I don't like to interrupt you, but your time is over. Just 1 minute, please. Last but not least, as to procedures, we have a plan to ensure communication to citizens. In case of an emergency, we would send people to the main mass media, for instance, the radio stations, whichever is available, of course, so that they can send messages and also reach the social media so as to provide minute after minute information to the general public. This is key to ensure communication to citizens in a timely manner, and also to provide the staff who is in charge of communication with the mobiles and extra batteries or portable batteries so that they can be in touch and send messages through the social media and networks in a readily manner. And last but not least, as conclusions, well, we realized we were not prepared to face a global and long-lasting threat like this one. Users behaved in a fully cooperative manner. We have to thank them for that. We had no problem with users' complaints or anything. Users were very understanding of the situation, and we also saw a high level of commitment from our workers. That was fantastic. We had exceeded our capacity, but people were there eager to work, and there were many volunteers also showing up to help and to work and to do anything possible to help the situation. And this is the end. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hernan.
Well,
And
to finish with this
finish
first
with this
set of
first part, we will
interventions,
have now Ferrocarriles
I
de la
will now
Generalitat de
give the floor to the
Cataluña
representative of the
with
Catalunya
Gregorio
region, the
Gomez
Autonomous Community
Bartolome.
of Catalunya in the northeastern part of Spain. And based on our debate, this is the only operator currently integrated. So Gregorio Gómez Bartolomé, who is the head of the integrated command post of the Catalonian Railways, will explain to us their experience on this opportunity and the blackout, which was solved earlier than the rest of the state, thanks to their vicinity to France. So, Gregorio? Gregorio Gómez, you have the floor to tell us about your experience. Gregorio, you have to open your microphone. We can't hear you. Gregorio, are you there? I think Gregorio has to leave the room and log on again. Well, that will be the end of his time. Anybody has his telephone numbers? Maybe someone can call him on the phone. Okay, he's trying to log in again. Well, in the meantime, I want to ask a question. The batteries on trains is a long-term consideration, but it's very urgent in my opinion. Why can't we try to do that faster? Because we cannot wait too long for the solution. We have to make an agreement with the industry and deploy all the necessary efforts because this is a very simple technological solution. And we should try to do it as fast as possible and not wait for very long. Yeah, that's a very good comment. Well, he had log on, but I don't see him now. We lost him again. If not, our plan B is to take a brief break right now, or we can start questions about this block right now, whatever you want. Well, we had planned a coffee break in 2 minutes. Yeah, a comfort break. Uh, just, in other words, a toilet break. No coffee. Well, maybe that's force majeure. Well, continuing with the agenda, we will meet again at in 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 10 minutes. 4:30 European time. 4:30 for Spain and 3:30 for Portugal. Just let me know when you want me to start passing the slides. Yes, you can move on to the next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone, and I am sorry for my technical difficulties. That was a blackout. Well, my company has several businesses. We have business services for travelers, merchandising, and we also have mountain tourism activities. On April 28th, when there was a blackout in the Iberian Peninsula, fortunately, in the ski mountains, we didn't have the cable cars operating, so we had no problems because it was April and these campaigns were not taking place. In addition to the problems we had, which occurred at 12:34 of April 28 with a loss of voltage affecting the Iberian Peninsula, which caused the suspension of the railway service on all our lines and businesses. Because of the lot of overhead line voltage signaling systems, low voltage in communications were significantly affected. Communications among the different trains and business activities. With regards to the scope of the impact, the metropolitan lines, which were 46 trains in service, stopped. His microphone is off. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can. Okay, the scope of the problem in the metropolitan lines was 46 trains in service stopped. 9 of them continued to operate. They were not in the stations. In the Montserrat back rack railway, all trains stopped on stations, and these facilitated evacuation. And in the Nuria Rack Railway, we had 1 train stopped on the way, and people had to be evacuated. In the Lleida La Pobla line, which is a diesel line, we had to cancel 2 trains from circulation because of lack of communications with the infrastructure administrator of the Lleida Pirineos station. So we were not able to have access to the trains. But the rest just worked normally because these were diesel trains. May I have the next slide? In terms of chronology, at 12:34, there was a generalized disruption of the electrical or the power supply. At 12:42, evacuation order for trains and stations, and we were aware of the generalized deficiency in power, which was affecting all railways because the drivers reported the loss of voltage, and from the central command post, we received information that there was no voltage in any of the points of the network. This was verified with the different areas of the company, and 8 minutes after the discontinuation, the evacuation order was given with the support of the fire brigade and the National Police of Catalonia. At around 1 o'clock, we started checking the elevators of the stations to identify whether there were any people trapped in the elevators. And since the integrated system of monitoring did not allow us to check all the cameras or the digital cameras on the elevators, we had to do it elevator by elevator for verification purposes. One couple of elderly people were rescued from one elevator. 1 hour after the blackout, all stations and 43 trains had been evacuated. We only had 3 more trains that were on the rails, and because of the place where they were parked, evacuation was difficult. One of the lines has single tracks, and that made difficult the evacuation. To evacuate one of the trains, we required the collaboration of several staff members because they had to walk more than 1 kilometer, and there were approximately 200 travelers. So we started to recover the voltage slowly, particularly for the stations and lightning, but the supply was not enough to recover the service in full. At 15:27, the railway service was reestablished between Malaguet and Segu, and the trains had to stop in Malaguet because of lack of communication with the infrastructure manager. At around 6 p.m., we started recovering the voltage on the catenary section between Peo del Funicular and Le Plains. And at around 7 p.m., we recovered the voltage of the catenary section in the nucleus of Barcelona and the metropolitan area. At 9 p.m., we recovered lines L6 and L7 were operating normally, and S1 and S2 with combined suburban trains had a combined frequency every 10 minutes to Sant Cugat, which is more or less the middle point of the line for the bifurcation. At 2136, we recovered the railway service from Plaza España to Cuatro Caminos, and we established L8 line with a normal frequency. At around 10:38 p.m., we recovered the services in Terraza and Reina Elisenda, and at around 11:30 p.m., we recovered Sabadell branch. Barcelona, Valles was normalized. We recovered the voltage, both traction and feeding voltage for auxiliary equipment in the stations. At 23:35, we had a gradual extension of the operational section up to Olesa, and the service between Igualada and Manresa could not be restored due to a lack of catenary voltage and multiple interlocking failures affecting 28 track circuit modules. At around 4:55 a.m. on April 29, all our lines were normalized. How did we manage this crisis? Well, once we identified the loss of catenary voltage, there was no lighting on the stations. A crisis committee was summoned at the command center to follow the protection plans. These affected all our businesses, so we activated all the protection plans with the necessary alerts. The train evacuations were implemented, and particularly because of the lack of lighting, this was immediately done, and there was fluid communication with SACAT, which is the Coordination Center for Emergencies of Catalonia, and with emergency line 112. Technical committees were set up, inviting the different stakeholders in the area of mobility, medical services, hospitals, energy distributors, and power companies, as well as the fire brigade, the police force, and civil protection. And from those committees, in the end, we communicated with them constantly about the different support needs required, for instance, from the police force or the fire brigade, to help us evacuate the trains that were in between stations. We try to guarantee mobility. We are a utility company, so we had to guarantee that people could go back to their normal lives. So we identified the needs for voltage of the different subcentrals, so that the specialists and the power companies could solve those issues and address those problems with the necessary maneuvers to facilitate the recovery of our services. From the command post and the crisis committee, we were in constant communication with the different business areas to see how the train evacuations were making headway in the different lines. After managing the crisis, which was very well managed, trains were evacuated very quickly. In 1 hour, all trains were evacuated. And of course, it was very helpful that the blackout occurred at midday. There were 55 trains in one line and 40 in the other line. We had 2/3 of the trains circulating. So there weren't that many passengers in these trains. So that facilitated the evacuation process in an orderly way, ensuring safety of our users. With regards to the improvement actions that we are working on and studying, after making an analysis of what happened on day 27th, the measures in terms of rolling stock infrastructures and systems to respond to similar situations, we want to ensure the following 5 objectives: protecting people and workers of the company, customers and workers, whether in the field of mobility or tourism. All workers were very much involved and were eager to help the drivers for train evacuations, and were willing, whenever we could reestablish the service, to very quickly recover our normal operations. Another important point is to coordinate the tasks of the different workers. The information to customers about the available alternatives. This is key to constantly inform about the different options available for them for if the mobility service is impaired, and the protection of our assets and to speed up service recovery. So these are the 5 key objectives for improvement after analyzing the events on April 28. One of the steps we will take is to centralize our businesses in command centers with an initial level of coordination and supervision for large-scale incidents such as this one, preventing us to deliver these services because of lack of power or poor communications. So we have our command center in Ruby, workshops and maintenance services. Another operating center will be Martorell, which is the operation center and workshop for maintenance activities. Another center is for maintenance and stations such as Plaza Catalunya, Monestrolville, that will manage all the information and management of the event in Montserrat. Balaguer, that will manage the crisis for that particular line. A general command center for all our businesses of tourism and mountain activities. And then, considering the new businesses we are opening according to the policy of Catalunya, these new business areas will be Europort and the Tarragona train, a cable car business that to be established in the city of Tarragona. So these businesses will be equally managed with ensured power systems that will enable us to overcome a similar situation of a blackout and respond to all the problems that these entails. Gregorio, I'm sorry. Well, we want to connect emergency lighting systems, access systems, fire extinguishing systems, and critical circuits, and to have loudspeakers or public address systems. So all our workers and users are constantly informed with the same message of the current situation and how things are evolving. Gregorio, we have to finish. Well, 2 more minutes, please. Another channel we are investigating are the dual batteries systems to avoid discontinuation of service and autonomy in case of blackout, and to ensure satellite communication and any terminals required in those management centers as an alternative method for communications. We have to assess adequate technological solutions for evacuations underground and in tunnels, and ensure the effectiveness of the Tetra communication systems, which is the system that we use from the command post and the train drivers, ensuring batteries and power systems to ensure communication standards in order to guarantee communication with train drivers as it happened on the 28th. That's all on my part. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You can prepare your questions, and at the end of the session, we can start the Q&A. Let's move on to our next presentation by Adif, which has 3 speakers. And you can distribute the time among yourselves as you wish. Our next speaker is from Adif. Between 2015 and 2017, he worked in the regional railroads of Valencia, in the Valencia region. And since 2024, he's the director of the Adif chapter and coordinates 19 traffic control centers with 600 trains per day. And we will also have Carlos Freire from Coloma. He is a manager, more than 20 years of experience in managing security and emergencies and safety, of course. His profession is very important. He is specialized in timber and forest management. And he works in the northeastern region of Spain. Finally, we will have Sergio Lozano Mialda, an economist with a master's degree in international relations and safety and security management. Between 2020 and 22, he was the business director of the Halamine project in Saudi Arabia. And since 2022, he is the development head of international activities. So without further ado, you may start.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Well, I'm going to speak from the point of view of the general railway management. We're going to share the situations that we all went through. We have all the same context, and we have shared the same problems. There has been diversity because of the specifics of every company. Well, this is the agenda outline. The railway impact first. Second, we will share the explanation about the management of this crisis. The General Railway Management, Traffic Department, Security and Safety, Stations Department, and Maintenance Department, and the efforts, yes, of course, made by the maintenance staff. And finally, conclusions. As to the railway impact, as it happened to our colleagues in the Iberian Peninsula after 11 in the morning, all the energy supply systems went down. Our network is divided into 7 management areas. We have 19 control commands from the central management centers or control centers. People started to communicate that there had been a supply loss, a power outage. We got then an idea of the magnitude of this situation. As to the main impact, well, it was a very critical situation. In the first minutes, the responders started to find out what was going on. We didn't know if it was a specific power outage, if it was a cybersecurity issue or what. And in a network with over 10,000 kilometers, well, more than 1,800 trains were affected at the time of the incident. And as to the impact in terms of figures, Here we have on the slide commuter trains. Over 1,400 trains were affected, and also freight trains, 96. Because of this, we activated all the protocols and emergency plans. To give a few examples, commuter trains, as it happened in other companies in urban areas. This was not a peak hour. It was easy to evacuate those trains because the security staff and responders were very instrumental and cooperative. As to management and aid problems, most of them happened with the long distance trains, 112. Over 2,000 passengers had to spend overnight in the stations. This was a big impact. Now, if we analyze how operational management went on, this is what we have. There was an activation of all ADIF emergency master plans. Contingency plans were activated as well. Luckily enough, most command centers and signaling energy supply systems have redundant power equipment. Because of this, we were able to continue operations. We also have analog communications between command centers and other stations. As we lost the mobile communications, we were able to maintain our communication because of our analog capabilities. Also, emergency external services were activated with security and safety entities, with the local government and state government. This was a crisis. It was difficult to identify what the whole picture was, what was going on. All human resources were put in place and activated. We benefit from a great cooperation from users, from the society. I would say that we had a very balanced response from the civil society and the population in general. We have to highlight that. Also, important was to follow the protocols. We have 19 command controls, and we saw that all people were following the same protocols. Also, there was autonomy in action in operations. If we had to go through a chain of approvals and commands, we would have been delayed in our actions. We were autonomous. So everybody was capable of taking action, and on the same basis, or based on the same protocols and contingency plans for emergencies. So this is the general outlook. Now, as to traffic management, bear in mind that our network has 19 control command centers. They were activated. After 10 minutes, all the committees committees were also activated. Central management committees and also territorial committees. These are 7 committees, by the way. So altogether, they were activated. Also, the presence of representatives from the train companies were required to be on site. Within a few hours, they were there. Also, they showed up at the different control centers. We had the police department and officers cooperating as well. Overall, thanks to the backup systems, power backup systems, UPSs and generators, we were able to continue operations. We were able to position also diesel trains and to do rescue operations. After contingency plans are started, the priority is to identify those trains that are having difficulties, those that may be in a tunnel or in the remote, difficult to access areas. Well, we were able to evacuate all the commute trains. We had a couple of long distance trains in the difficult to access locations and with no possibilities for services. That's why we had to activate some emergency locomotives. All the teams cooperated. We had extra shifts or extended working hours. People stayed longer than they should because replacements were difficult. The taking over had been made difficult because of mobilization problems. But I guess the staff was really keen and eager to cooperate. Also, we had volunteers from the organization, and I would like to highlight the effort of all the society in a situation like this. Then the restoration of service came about. On the 29th of April, we were able to restore all these schedules. We had had energy supply issues and some technical problems remained until May. But the important aspect is that on the following day, imagine 1,000 trains stopped, many on the tracks. Commute services were difficult, so the drivers were not able to locate the trains that were available to restart service. So if we focus on the commute services, I would say that the restart was quite complex on the following day. It was a slow process to recover the trains that had been stopped in remote areas. It was difficult also to fit the schedules of drivers and trains. So in general, the recovery of service, the restoration in Catalonia and in the areas close by to Madrid was slow. Only on the following day in the afternoon, they were fully restored. Now, high-speed services were recovered earlier. They resumed their normal schedules at noon on April the 29th. We were able to facilitate the rescue of peoples at the stations and helping those who had to spend the night in the stations. So I would say that recovery on the following day was easy in the high-speed services. It was not the same case in the commute service. So this was traffic management. Now, let's move on to security and safety, and I will give the floor to my colleague, Carlos. You're a bit running out of time, so just to let you know. Thank you. Go on. Thank you. Hello to everybody. Thanks for your introduction. As to security and safety, as Angel said, we activated the emergency plan that we have in place in our company to coordinate external and internal aid and support. We had civil protection, security forces, all resources available, the Red Cross. And those resources were targeted to the trains that were stranded. That was our priority, and also evacuating passengers. Some trains had been stranded in complex areas, in areas difficult to evacuate, difficult to provide with food and aid, particularly in Barcelona and in the San Martin areas. Most passengers, I would say, self-evacuated. They had the assistance of the crew on board the train, but some also did it by themselves. In some cases, they were supported by the civil protection forces or police or civil guard. In high-speed lines, passengers had to wait inside the trains for help. We had even some trains who carried around 900 passengers. And in those, people had to wait for evacuation assistance. In most stations, well, they were closed, most of them, but they were reopened at night to have people staying there for the night if they had not been rescued. So many passengers spend the nights in those stations. And as to 24-hour security, we coordinated our efforts with the civil guard and police. Also, the fire department and the police officers showed up in person or used their mobile equipment to maintain communication with the command centers. In addition to Cash 24, we have security and safety centers which operate 24/7 in many areas, in Barcelona and in the surrounding areas. As you see on the photograph, we also had support from civil protection and from the civil guard. They provided support in organizing passengers, and I also did specific interventions for people with special needs. They provided food and aid, they provided blankets for people who stayed overnight. And the Red Cross also helped with aid in stations and trains. They also gave assistance to passengers who had medical issues or psychological crisis. So communication, operationally speaking, was maintained thanks to landlines, radio, and physical staff mobilization. At all times, we kept internal coordination with the traffic department to locate stranded trains and to organize rescues, and also with the stations department for closing and reopening the stations to offer aid to the stranded passengers or for those patients who were in transit. I'd like to mention something. Even if we had no the fortunate situation of our Portuguese colleagues who had a strike, uh, I would say that the temperature was kind of friendly. It was not too cold, and this contributed to the comfort of people who had to spend the night in the trains. So thanks, we were fortunate not to have very low temperatures that day. And in general, people were very understanding, very cooperative, passengers, staff, etc. And that was an important aspect that I wanted to highlight. Now I'll give the floor to my friend Sergio. Thank you, Carlos. Yes, to conclude, I'd like to refer now to another department which was highly involved in this crisis, the stations department. The incident covered the entire network, yet not all the stations were impacted, only high-speed stations and the conventional stations, regional capitals or centers, and isolated cases of stations due to train evacuations. And as to the key actions performed by this department, we have first, in cooperation with the security staff, we control access to avoid crowds in the lobbies. We also activated generators in most of the main stations. We provided support to vulnerable passengers, to those with mobility issues, and we did this through the Acerca service. We extended the working hours of the station staff. There was strong coordination with security forces and the UME, which were present in the stations and with overnight stays in some cases. And also barriers were lifted at all these station parking lots to allow the free movement of vehicles. Another key department in this situation was the maintenance department. Some of the most important actions were the mobilization of specialized personnel in the ADIF 336 series locomotives, which were mobilized to rescue the passengers and the trains also. Here we have the number of vehicles available and the trains, and these units were all the time available during the day. Significant damage happened to the railways infrastructure, which affected the electrification systems and the safety and telecommunications facilities. The losses amount to almost 2 million euros in damages. All personnel focused on ensuring the operation of facilities, and a total of 20 rescue services were carried out using 13 locomotives, keeping available all the time. They were standby from 3 o'clock on the 28th until the following day at 4:40 p.m. Conclusions. A few ideas about our conclusions. In the first place, this crisis showed the fragility of our communications and the need for having independent communication systems. It also highlighted the importance of increasing generators' autonomy and the need for providing trains with satellite systems. As I said, increasing generators' autonomy also to ensure the refueling of the units in case of emergency, reinforcing the main stations with human and material resources so that we will be prepared as soon as possible to respond to an emergency. We have increased the number of security and safety personnel in main stations already. On the other hand, we are planning to develop alternative railway corridors in case of failure in the main corridors. Also, we have to reinforce the train personnel. We have to provide drivers with more flexible schedules. We have to increase the safety of passengers on board. And last but not least, we have to improve conditions for transporting people during rescues. And this means of transportation should be more flexible than now. Once again, to conclude, I'd like to highlight the human factor in this process. The general population and the ADIF employees who extended their working hours and even showed up at the stations and control centers out of their working hours to give a hand. This is the end of our presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, this is the end of
So
this
we have
presentation
concluded.
by the Spanish network, which is represented in this case by Miguel Ángel García Piñero, Luis Belén Castaño, and Fernando Díaz Rodríguez, who will make a successive presentation. So they started working several years ago. One of them was a train driver, and he has been working for 15 years in improving security of the trains and corporations. Belín Castaño has 8 years experience. He has participated in the design, construction, and standardization of the new generation of trains, some of them with emergency battery systems. And currently, he is the technical coordinator manager of Renfe Viajeros. And Fernando Díaz Rodríguez is the area manager. He has 32 years of experience in Renfe. He has occupied the different posts, and he is in the area of finding railway transportation solutions. He's a very prestigious and renowned individual. So you have the floor, but don't don't extend your presentation too much because we are short of time. So the floor is yours. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Alberto, for your introduction. On April 28, we were all working, of course. We were not on strike as the Portuguese, and we had a lot of travelers circulating throughout the country. The temperature was very pleasant, but anyway, there was an electrical disruption or a blackout which prevented the transportation of our railways, affecting public trains uh, and commercial trains and all the products that we have in commercial services. There were significant economic consequences, and most of all, our goodwill was significantly affected. The trains stopped from 12:33 until the early morning of the 29th. And there was impact up to day 30 in our operations. According to the timeline, the initial blackouts began in the Catenary section, and the facilities across all the high-speed and conventional lines. At 2 p.m., we lost mobile phone communications. And at 7:15, the landline telephone service became intermittent. And at 8:45 p.m., power could be supplied from the Northern Energy Control Systems by ADIV and the supplier companies, but we were not able to go beyond Valladolid or Zamora to the southern part of the peninsula. In power restoration timeline, it was restored by segments, by zones in the south, Levante, northeast, north, and the Mediterranean region. We started after 10:30 p.m. operations. We were able to restore the service of trains that were in the different stations. Power was restored in the northern part at 10:30 p.m. and in Levante at around midnight. In the south, which was the most complicated region, we started the restoration or the recovery at around 11:40 p.m. in different areas, Villanueva to Adamuz and Adamuz to Hornachuelos. But we were not able to recover the whole train service until 6:48 a.m. with full power restoration across all lines. The trips that were affected because of this blackout in public service trains, there were more than 61,000 people traveling, and only a small number of travelers were able to travel. 5,011 trains were affected. In commercial services, we have on board of the trains affected 18,794 travelers. 84,223 were unable to travel because the service was interrupted. And in total, 304 trains were affected on the 28th. Okay, I will tell you about the economic impact of this situation for Renfe in terms of public services. In terms of revenues, we didn't lose much because at that time, they were using their regular tickets. But with regards to commercial services, the estimated losses are 3 million euros. And the highest chart, 3.37 million euros for indemnities. and or compensation 700,000. Well, this is the information, more detailed information regarding the estimates for revenue impact, expected compensation, cost incurred from ticket refunds. Returns 1 million. Well, extraordinary steps for an extraordinary situation. The first step is coordination with civil protection and UME. And also very important, the coordination with ADIF and with the National Police Force. When this blackout took place, we started establishing communications with all the drivers, and there was a lot of uncertainty in all the stations. And we were considering several possibilities. It was very confusing. We didn't know exactly what to do. We had the police force in the main stations, and they were the ones who decided to close the stations at 12:40 and to evacuate all the people in the area. Renfe is very large. It's very different from the rest of the operators in the area. So the time for evacuation of travelers was practically one full day, 20 hours in total. In some cases, the trains were stopped in the Pajares Tunnel, which was inaccessible. Uh, and the evacuation of so many travelers was really a very challenging proposition. Uh, as I said, the large terminals such as Atocha and Sands, there is a staff available, and with the collaboration of ADIF, we could reach all the points along the railway. And in those cases, it was easier. But I want to underline not just the contribution of the police force and ADIF. There was a total blackout in the management center, in the hub. We were close to the ADIF command center, and then we moved to 200 meters away. In the old location, the station is being rebuilt and refurbished. And at the time of the incident, the site was not enough to provide power to all the computers in the management center. So we were working in the command post in H24 of ADIF, and thanks to an excellent coordination, we were able to talk to the train drivers in other stations and establish very good coordination. We also had the support of the Red Cross to provide food and water. And another point, which was an exceptional measure, was to keep the stations open. Once we realized that the actual problem was a blackout and we didn't know how long it will take to restore the power service, the decision was made at the national level to open up all the stations so that passengers could spend the night at the station. And people with special needs, handicapped people, we provided hotel rooms for them. Uh, and of course, we only helped those that were visible to us in those stations, but we helped them and provided them hotel rooms. And on the next day, we established alternative transportation for travelers that had to take connecting trips. And with regards to post-sales measures, we exceeded the requirements of the European Union respecting the traveler's rights. And I emphasize this point because there were changes with no additional payments. They were a lot of reimbursements and return trips on different dates. Reimbursement for alternative transportation at reasonable costs for travelers that had to use alternative public transportation services, compensation because of delays as well. And despite the fact that this was a special circumstance that could be framed within Article 10 of the European Union bylaws, we made a commitment to compensate everyone. And then the reimbursement of hotel expenditures or lodging expenditures, reimbursement to travelers that did not receive food or lodging and were paid out of their own pockets. We reimbursed all of that money. Miguel Angel, now it's your turn. Thank you, Luz. Good afternoon, everyone. The advantage of speaking the last in this presentation is that I will focus on the areas that have not been discussed. First of all, the magnitude of this event was huge. Uh, at the time of the blackout at midnight, we had over 1,800 trains stopped at stations, on the tracks, in tunnels, and a total of 2.2 million travelers affected. And the overall impact for the 28 and 29 uh, uh, some of the trains only recovered the next day, and the global impact, I repeat, on travelers was 2.2 million travelers. It was a very significant impact. It, but we reacted immediately in 5 minutes before we realized what was really going on. We started taking action, and because of the poor communication, because of the lack of power, that was not easy. And in the large stations, things were more complicated. The Atocha station, for instance, which is downtown, it was impressive the number of people around this station. Everybody was asking for help. The bars were open, serving people, the Red Cross, the police, the civil guard, everybody came to give us their contribution. So let me insist as a summary, because I only have 5 minutes. Which were the main priorities and challenges? Well, the first priority is passenger safety, and then ensuring communications, maintaining effective communications with passengers, with the staff, and with all the emergency services. And then to secure alternative transportation whenever possible. And the service restoration was only late in the afternoon, and it was very difficult to manage locally. We didn't have power backups. We didn't have any alternative systems. The network was collapsed, and we had to call our volunteers, our staff, to assist us, to provide us support in all the affected areas. So this is the general context. We uh, immediately convened all the stakeholders. We organized work teams. I won't insist on strategic considerations. We will share this presentation with all of you. And then with regards to technological solutions, Alberto, don't worry. We are buying new trains in Renfe that have the ability to run for 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometers after the blackout in order to move out to a safe place. So important operational considerations, which are easy to implement. I would like to emphasize that we have to promote the emergency panels and do drills, because these very important events, such as a blackout, occur very seldom, but whenever they occur, we have to be trained for them. So drills are necessary. And at the local level, let me talk about the feedback experience in Renfe. We have implemented simple things already. On land, we have Renfe stations, and of course public address systems. These are so important so that people know what is going on. I mean, simple things, but easy to implement. We have also implemented what we call the survival kit for trains. These survival kits are indispensable in all trains, with water, um, blankets, uh, flashlights. All of these has been implemented in our trains in order to avoid additional difficulties the next time we face such an event, and we hope it will never occur. But in case of any emergency, we have to be ready, we have to be prepared, and we have to be able to overcome these exceptional situations. And to conclude, I think I am just in time. We want to focus on three basic aspects that we have already implemented. The immediate response processes. We have a protocol of activation, which takes 15 minutes. The activation of the crisis management, the staff team should be within 15 minutes after the incident, with direct communication channels to all operational centers. We are working on prioritizing all evacuation procedures for travelers in the stations, coordinated with support services at the different stations. And with regards to communications at the local level, we are working on multi-channel communications, including public address systems, mobile alerts, and station staff equipped and trained in the use of portable megaphones or loudspeakers. So I think that the blackout has been a very significant and important lesson for the future. I think that my time is up. Thank you very much. And let me just finish with what my colleagues already mentioned. The support of all of our colleagues was incredible. Train drivers working long hours, all the staff at the stations, the management centers, they were all involved at a high level of responsibility. So this is another lesson learned, that fortunately we have wonderful people, and whenever these things happen, they are willing to go the extra mile. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we have finished the experience of our operators and administrators of infrastructure. So let me give the floor to Laura Peterson from IUC. She is responsible for all the security and safety activity, which is a very cross-cutting topic. And she will give us her vision about the activities in this area. And then we will go on to Q&A and a summary and conclusions. Laura, whenever you want.
Thank you. Hola a todos. Hablo inglés. I will speak English. So my name is Laura Peterson. I work at the UIC Security Platform, and I'm just going to give a brief introduction to our activities which are relevant for crisis management. So for those of you who do not know, the UIC Security Platform is a global level. It brings together the security experts and directors of different UIC members to address all threats that could happen in the rail environment, from everyday crimes like vandalism, graffiti, all the way up through to terrorism. We're currently chaired by SNCF, and we have a vice chair, the Indian Railways. Like most UIC platforms, we bring the members together to share experience, to ensure coherence between different security policies, elaborating different recommendations, and address new threats and develop innovative solutions to solve arising security issues. We work mainly through 5 working groups. We have 3 permanent working groups: new technologies, human factors, strategy, procedures, and regulations, which sort of address every facet of railway security. And then we have 2 thematic working groups that were created at the demand of our members. The first one dealing with sabotage, intrusions, and attacks, and the most recent one, crisis management, which I'll get into a bit in the next slide. The security platform also brings together all of our members at the annual UIC World Security Congress. So you're all invited to save the date for the 20th one, which will be happening in December this year, 2 to 4 December in Rabat, Morocco. It's co-organized with ONCF, the Moroccan Railways, on the theme of tomorrow's railway security, combining people and technology. Voila. So what about the crisis management working group? So the aim of this working group really is to foster cooperation on the management of security incidents, management of crises. The members of the working group tend to be experts in either security, crisis management, business continuity, etc. It's currently chaired by the Polish Railways and vice chaired by the Indian Railways. We currently gather 46 experts from 30 organizations. You can see sort of all the logos of all the different UIC members that have joined the working group, and it's open to all UIC members. So if you don't see your logo on there but want to be part of our working group, just let me know. We meet about twice a year, once in person, once online. And our current topic that we've really been focusing on is business continuity, which is extremely linked to what we've been talking about today in this webinar, as well as crisis management plans, procedures, and training exercises. A zoom on some of our recent activities. Our most recent in-person meeting was about organizing exercises, and a shout out here to IP, who in the beginning talked about their exercise training that they had done about a blackout scenario. We had the privilege to see that ourselves at that meeting. And then we had more recently an online meeting talking about the regulatory aspects of business continuity, focusing on both the NIS2 and the CR directive, but also other regional legislations from all of the UIC regions that can help us ensure business continuity. We already have a UIC recommendation guidance booklet out from 2017, Recommendations for Crisis Management. It's publicly available. You can get it for free on the UIC shop or download it from the UIC website. And we're currently working on a similar recommendations document on business continuity. I've learned a lot from this webinar, and I'm sure the other members of the working group will have too. So let us know if you want to contribute to our work. And I think that was my last slide. Yes. Thank you, Paco, for giving me some time to inform everyone about what we're doing. And thanks to the speakers once again for a really great sharing of experiences here today.
Thank you, Laura, for your information. So we are going to start with our Q&A session. If you want, you can share the questions now. I have some in general. This question has to do with communications. We have many similar questions. Let's try to address them. Communications about public address communications, users communications, satellite communications. We have heard that communications have saved us from many problems, and perhaps you could give your opinion versus Portugal on the importance of communications and on the most appropriate technologies for communications in the future. So you are welcome to answer this question.
Good afternoon. On behalf of IP, Infrastructures of Portugal, as for communications or telecommunications, as we said, what we felt was that they drop within time. And what was maintained was analogic, and we were substituting the analogic for digital within time. But they drop as well. And so we thought that one of the redundancies we must have is recovering our analogic or landline systems. And another, not everywhere, but in key points. So we can guarantee that at least one telecommunication line, a more robust and resilient one, is working.
Very well, Adif. I believe this is still an open discussion. It depends on the use of it. Is it for emergencies? Or is it for communications with the drivers? Say on land or land communication systems, they worked pretty well provided that they had energy supply. These systems are quite simple, provided that trains have batteries, they work. Of course, specific issues arose, particularly in high-speed systems. They turned off the batteries in order to save energy, but then they would lose communication from the command centers to the trains. It's an important aspect. It has been considered and also discussed with the enforcement agencies. And I think, as I said, it's still an open discussion. Yes, a combination of technologies and strategies is key. Another question has to do with the impact on signaling systems. How would diesel trains be controlled, for instance? Could you tell us about that? How did you manage that, particularly in the tunnels? I think you used diesel on that line. And I guess they were able to move up to Balaguer. How did you manage that situation? Yes, we have a signaling system and blocking system. We don't have crossings of trains on that line. Everything is fully automated. The phone worked. Yes, it did. We were able to communicate. Adif, anything you would like to add? Lack of signaling, did it make the movement of diesel trains more difficult? In most cases, automated control systems for signaling and schedules worked long enough to ensure the positioning of all the diesel trains in safe stations, except for a few places or locations. Having supply systems to continue operations was an important aspect. Yes, we had hybrid diesel trains prepared years ago. And when energy was resumed, well, they continued operations, but we never lost our signaling capability. Now, there was a point in time where we have stock trains. So we made a decision to deploy a train, one train per track. It's only a single train moving per track. So everything will be safe. Had we lost signaling and had many trains, that it would have been a problem. We would have to rescue many trains. Fortunately, that was not necessary. At the time of preparing plans for power outages, is planning directed or dictated by governments, or are you autonomous in doing the planning? So the question is, do the train companies prepare their own plans, or are they dictated by another authority? We have an alternate emergency plan for situations like this. Of course, we always try to improve existing plans, but I would say that we did not have a specific plan for a disruption situation such as this. Now, we do have internal protocols for internal coordination and external coordinations, and they were activated. So, but we have to have plans for situations like this, either caused by a blackout or any other reason. Fernando, would you like to answer this question? Yes, I can do that. For trains close to stations, the responders inform passengers. We don't know how long are we going to stay here. We suggest that you evacuate the train gradually in calm because everything has been stopped. To those places where we were able to take more staff for assistance in evacuation, for instance, the tunnels in Barcelona and in the nearby of Cordoba, well, they were instrumental there. The only problem we had at the end was that people left their luggage and ran away. So we had to do this work of recovering luggage and their owners, of the people who left their luggage because they were scared. This happened in two trains, by the way, that we had in the Chaco Tunnel. We evacuated the passengers through the tunnel evacuation routes. It was done in a record time. I guess it was quite fast. The whole evacuation process was readily completed. Another question. Those passengers who were evacuated from the trains, let's say in the field, what happened to those passengers that were evacuated? We assume it is difficult to manage road transportation for them. We are specialists in organizing transportation. So we were able to find buses. For example, in Almodóvar del Rio, we contacted the Sevilla division. We managed to get a few buses, and they were there then taking passengers to the sports center in Almodóvar. In Ocaña, and Carancon, we also help people with 2 buses to the sports center with the help of civil protection. And then when everything was settled, we took the passengers back to the train and then took them to Sevilla. They stayed there for the night, and I think it was quite a good process. We had no major issues with passengers, no complaints. They were very understanding. Vanessa, Paco, do you know if there is any other question, or should we move on to the wrap up? We have 12 minutes left. Vanessa, I think wants to tell you about an initiative that we have for next year, and then we will move on to the wrap up. Okay? Well, I'd like to thank again all the speakers for their cooperation. Paco and I were talking about all the information that you have shared. It's amazing and highly valuable. On behalf of UIC, well, you have heard already Laura telling you about the activities that we conduct in security and safety, mostly in security, crisis management included. Well, at UIC, we want to be innovative. So Paco and myself, Paco in infrastructure and myself with passengers, we have launched a project for next year. And we would like to find out about how to improve communications between passengers and operators and infrastructure managers. We've heard oftentimes that communication is key. Communication is a key factor in crisis management
Communications
and
is
also
key.
in case of disruptions. So we want to highlight that. And at UIC, we are very concerned about that in our departments. In all our departments, we have working tools that help us in communications. So we will leave you our email address around so that you can contact us to join us in this safety work project. Thank you. That's all we would like to add on behalf of Paco and myself. Very well. Before drawing conclusions, I'd like to refer to the batteries again, mentioned by Miguel. Batteries have solved problems. And I think in the new trains, uh, batteries are being included for longer duration. Do you think this is something complicated or very costly? Because it has a big impact, not only in the case of a blackout, but in case of any disruption. There could be disruptions for any of the reasons, from fires or earthquakes, etc. So what do you think about this in the long term? It depends on what do you mean by long terms. Obviously, we need dynamic tests and perhaps the modification of the structure of trains would be required. I don't know. I don't, well, perhaps we could do it earlier. Bureaucracy or red tape will not allow for that. Excuse me, but we have, I would say, limited space Of course, we need perhaps the same battery, but with less weight and with the capacity to cover longer distances. But we are studying that. We have to calculate the distance or the optimum distance that could be covered by a single battery. Then the trains part is to be considered. How can we fit in those batteries in the trains? And if we manage to solve that earlier, we would be very happy. It's something you cannot do that overnight. You cannot equip trains like that overnight. Anything else? How do you see that? The development of these trains, or do you see any difficulties in this? Or do you think a way out how we can do this is just a matter of red tape, or does it have to do with technological difficulties or issues? I know red tape is sometimes an obstacle. So, uh, what do you think? Perhaps you have an idea about this. Okay, it's not a joke, but what happened on that day? Well, I have worked in the short distance trains, and there are two technologies. The auxiliary service battery, with that service, in that battery, you can have higher capacity. Of course, you have to do the right planning or scheduling. And if there is a technical need, you can move the train on that battery. But there are those who speak about a dedicated battery. Auxiliary services usually uh, auxiliary services usually run for a shorter distance and displacement. And if you use the battery on a continuous basis,
If you
then you
use it
would lose the life of the battery.
continuously, the useful life of the
You will run
battery
out
is
of battery.
shortened.
A
A
dedicated
devoted
battery,
battery
well, is something
uh,
different.
uh, is different from
Auxiliary
auxiliary
services have their
services. It
own
has its
battery
own
for the
battery
movement of the
for
train
the train
if
if
there
you
is
don't
no
have a
catenary,
catenary system. And
and you can travel longer distances.
we were
Our
requesting
requirements
the
were to
ability
have
of trains to move
trains that would
with
be
a
able to move
ventilation,
on the basis of,
but that
let's say,
requires
ventilation.
air
Let's say
conditioning
an
and the
air system,
use
but
of
with
all the
no air
systems for
conditioning
emergency
services.
situations. In a train that
Of
is
course, we
already
could
operating, that can be
do
done.
that, as you
But
ask, but as
in
everything in
terms of the
life,
regulatory framework,
we
we
have
have
the
to follow
famous
the famous
402
402.
rule,
And this
which provides
regulation
that if
says
there
that
is
if
a
there is a
significant change in
significant
the
change in
stock, you will
materials,
have to
we have
see
to
if it is a
analyze
significant
that
or
at
impact
length, and that
change. If
requires a new
so, it
scheduling
requires
and
a new
programming of the trains.
rescheduling for the train.
Well, this is a
It
very
would
brief
not be that
summary,
easy.
of
It depends
course,
on the type of train.
but we
Perhaps you
have
can
to,
do it, perhaps you
uh,
cannot.
well,
But
for
suppose it
instance,
is
if
a
it's a train that is 15 years old,
15-year
it
life cycle
has to be
train, then you would have
reprogrammed,
to replace
change
the
the
battery
battery,
perhaps
make
in
sure
time.
that there
You
is
would have to
available
see it
space
on
for
a case
that.
basis. Perhaps
Maybe
it
that
can
can
be
be
done.
done.
I don't
I
know.
don't
The no
think it
is the
should
answer. Now that
not
we're
be
going to have
done.
to struggle with this standard,
Maybe
of course, we will have to.
we can work on that. Well, thank you. Maybe we can succeed with this. Well, the 402 is only called in Spain. This is a risk assessment system for changes. That's the 402 they were talking about. Well, maybe we can overcome all of these difficulties in the future because now surgeons are operating over satellite communication. So I think that we don't have to complicate our lives too much. Uh, we know that there are difficulties. We only have 3 minutes left to summarize. I think that this episode has been one more of what we have experienced over the last few years. I have an aunt who is almost 100 years old, and she said that over her last 5 years of life, she has seen more events than during the rest of her life. We have to be prepared for new things that we can't even imagine. So it's not just trying to solve the problem afterwards. Maybe if they reoccur, we have to learn and adopt common standards for communications to take advantage of the attitude of our staff members. When the emergency occurs, everybody wants to help, fortunately. But we have to be able to organize our volunteers, because the volunteers in the railroad system are fantastic. They don't know about blackouts, but they have a very important strength, and is their knowledge about the system, so that they know how to help. And this is a common factor. And these uh, element of the 402 should also be useful to make sure that this is fine if we have the money and we are not in a rush. But if we want the railroad to be efficient, we have to be more expeditious, more reasonable, with less bureaucracy, less paperwork. That's my personal opinion. I think that there is a room for improvement in terms of all of these paperwork and bureaucratic uh, steps. And you have to know when you can skip the rules, because sometimes we have to do it. So I will encourage you to think about this concept. I would like to thank UIC for this opportunity. I want to thank you for all your contributions. And it's very important for us to exchange ideas, not just for another blackout, but for any crisis. The importance of communications, of decentralizing, improvising. In some cases, people are very willing to improvise whenever it is needed. A few years ago, it was forbidden to have medications on board of trains, but this is something that has to change. We have to be able to reconsider many things, because unfortunately, uh, there are things that happen unexpectedly. So without further ado, I just want to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alberto, for moderating this session. And thank you to all the speakers for opening up all of these valuable information. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. This was very interesting. Bye-bye, and enjoy the rest of your day or afternoon.
Gracias.
Vanessa.
Au revoir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Laura.